Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's March 19th, 2022, and today what I'm going to do is share a video clip from a YouTube channel called the All In Podcast. They're a bunch of four venture capitalists that are always talking about world events, economic influences, and certainly looking at their investments as well. And yesterday they posted a video, and I'm going to share a clip from David Freeborough. Now, David was one of the key members in Monsanto's. And there's an awful lot I really like about David Freeborough. He's a very intelligent, very insightful person. Monsanto is a company that made the genetically modified plants that were resistant to the herbicides that were applied to the plants, and I'm against that. However, the other research that's going on with genetically modified plants can be super beneficial, but that isn't what the topic of this video is about. With the current world events, it reminds me to a video that I posted 2 years ago on March 24th, 2020. I posted a video because of the current events at that time, which was America was just waking up to the fact that we had a pandemic that was not yet described as a pandemic going to affect the global economy. And this is just before all the shortages started happening here in the States. And the video was about starting your own gardens and all. Because of the current world events, which David will talk about here briefly, momentarily rather, and I think it's worth listening to a significant segment of his contribution to this topic. But because of Russia invading Ukraine and the sanctions, this is going to have a tremendous impact on food supplies, even here in the States. So I think it's another good opportunity to really think about doing gardening yourselves. Everyone should when I'm talking about gardening, I'm talking about food forest. I'm talking about, like I talked about previously, starting off small, or even if you live in the heart of the city, can you network? Can you work with other people to get your share of crops and all? And I won't go into all the different details of the ways that I did back 2 years ago, and that was March 24th. I think I recorded on the 23rd of 2020. And it had a lot to do with Victory Gardens, which I explained in that video. But without any further ado, I'm going to start off by going to important information that David's going to share with us.
That provide meat for the world. So what can you tell us about the downstream effects of there not being potentially or half as much crops coming out next year, and what would happen in places that are the beneficiaries or dependent on wheat and fertilizer from Russia?
So there's a number of first order and then second order effects that are not just about sanctions, but also about export controls by Russia that are creating swings in food markets like we've never seen, and will almost certainly lead to widespread famine by the end of this year at this point. So the first important point to note is about 15% of the world's calories come from wheat. About a third of that wheat comes from Russia, Ukraine. Russia has banned export of wheat. And the wheat spring planting season is like now, this week. And there's not a lot of planting going on. A lot of commodity folks are in the field trying to figure out who's actually going to go to field and plant. But no one's making the concerted effort that they normally would under normal circumstances. So not only is the current wheat supply in Russia, Ukraine blocked up and cannot make its way to countries like Africa or countries in Africa and elsewhere, but the future planting season is now significantly at risk. And again, that's 15% of global calories. And just to take a step back, the whole planet Earth operates on a 90-day food supply. So once we stop making food, humans run out of food in 90 days. So another way to think about that is our food supply excess, our capacity in excess is about 25% of our global production. So if our global production goes down by 12%, we've lost half of our global food supply. And that's not just linearly across all nations. What happens is the most vulnerable nations lose their food supply first, and the richer nations buy that food supply to secure their population's calories. And so you very quickly see a bifurcation happen when you have a shortage in a food supply like this of just a few points, where suddenly famine is a real risk. And we already have about 800 million people on Earth that are subsisting on below 1,200 calories a day. So this very quickly tips the bucket in a significant way in a number of countries that's going to be really awful. And that's just on the wheat supply and wheat planting problem. The bigger problem is the energy price problem and the phosphorus and potassium problem. All fertilizer is made up of nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. Those are the three major types of fertilizer that farmers around the world have to use every year in order to grow that crop. Without fertilizer, plants don't grow. Nitrogen is made from natural gas. 98% of the world's ammonia is made from natural gas. Natural gas prices, as you guys know, have doubled, and the futures market looks like in some places natural gas prices going up like 4x. As a result, the price of ammonia fertilizer, nitrogen-based fertilizer, has gone from $200 a ton to $1,000 a ton. So it's 5 times as expensive to buy basic ammonia fertilizer today than it was a few weeks ago or a few months ago. And so this is now leading a lot of farmers around. And then the other big problem is phosphorus. So phosphorus, by some estimates, there's a little variation around here, but about 10% of the world's phosphate comes out of Russia. And about, call it 25% of the world's potassium comes out of Russia, potash. Both of those markets are blocked up. They are sanctioned, and they have banned exports. Russia has through the rest of 2022. So around the world, the cost to make nitrogen fertilizer has skyrocketed because of natural gas prices, because of the Russia problem. And Russia is not exporting potassium and phosphorus. And as a result, the price of nitrogen's gone from 200 to 1,000. The price of potassium's gone from 200 to 700. And the price of phosphorus has gone from 250 to 700. So now it's so expensive to grow a crop that a lot of farmers around the world are pulling acres out of production. And they're actually going to grow less this year than they would have otherwise because it is so expensive and they cannot access fertilizer locally to plant crops. So not only do we have the wheat problem, we now also have the fertilizer problem and the acres coming out of production problem. And so food supplies are going to go down even further, and this is going to become even more catastrophic. And so there's a scrambling going on right now. Food prices around the world, as a result, everyone starts buying up all the commodities. They buy up all the corn, they buy up the soybeans, they buy up the wheat. And the price for corn has nearly doubled, whereas, from where it was in July of 2020. The price of soybeans, the price of wheat are all skyrocketing. And in a lot of countries, they cannot afford to acquire, and individuals cannot afford to buy food with the skyrocketing commodity prices.
Can I ask you a question? I think it's estimated that the U.S. food supply, if you could X out the waste, would actually feed most of the developing world, because I think 30 to 40% of all of our food is wasted. Can you do something with that?
Yeah, that is actually true. A lot of that happens at the point of consumption. So it's in people's homes. So it's a reverse supply chain problem where, we throw away a lot of like stale bread and cereal that goes bad or whatever. There's some in the fresh vegetables market, but generally the core calorie producing commodities are rice, wheat, potatoes, and corn. Those commodities don't go bad in the supply chain. They end up getting tossed out at the end of the supply chain, which is at the point of consumption at home. So, I'm not sure there's a real solution there right now. The bigger issue is like, how do you get bulk commodities to the places that are going to need them over the next 12 months? So look, right now we're reducing food supplies, stocks around the world. There are strategic reserves that are getting opened up and being released. As that starts to get diminished, and as the production kind of numbers start to come out, it looks like less acres are in production. And God willing, we have a good weather year everywhere this year, because, a bad weather year in some markets could completely decimate the remaining supply that's coming out this year.
So the discussion goes on quite a bit longer than what I'm sharing with you today, and I really think it's really valuable to go and at least watch this segment of the All In podcast. There's other pearls that are offered as well. I just wanted to share this information. Hopefully it stimulates some people to say, okay, let's let's think about what we can do as far as producing less waste. So one of the key things that David was talking about is that the bulk of our modern agricultural system is heavily reliant on fertilizers and pesticides. Excuse me. The fertilizers, as David said, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium, are those prices are all going to be going up this year, and many farmers won't be using it. What is one of the keys to go from monoculture, in other words, big, just either soybean or corn fields, and a lot of this corn is being used for the ethanol that's going into automobiles. The corn is also going into an artificial sugar that's being that's being put into many of our food sources that aren't healthy for us. So this would be an obvious opportunistic situation where many wise people can think about converting our industrial agricultural systems into adapting to regenerative agriculture, permaculture, those sorts of things, where we steer away from using fertilizers and pesticides and go more organic and have polycultures as opposed to having monocultures. So in other words, not just having these, as you drive by in the country and you see these rows and rows of corn or soybean or whatever it may be, it's mixing it up, like going back to being more like small scale farmers. And that is part of the future, because we're using natural gas, which ultimately all of these resources, whether it's oil, natural gas, they have a limit to them. There's only so much in the earth, and we need to save those for future generations as well. So, and certainly right now we have to bump up our resources here in the United States to meet the demand, but in the future, doing our big conversions that we've talked about. But back to the main thing that I think that's so important is each one of us can start doing composting, or find a place that will do the composting for us, reducing the waste. Cardboard is a beautiful resource. Cardboard and paper products. I know people are concerned about inks. I've done videos on this in the past. Please go back and watch some of those videos. But with building the microbial units, microbial colonies within our soil, we don't have to apply nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium to our soil. We're allowing the microorganisms in the soil to do it, and we need to produce our plants organically. So I think all of us can start to think and support growers who are growing things organically, building, are developing polycultures, are encouraging seasonal growth and more food storage as well to help us get through the long seasons. You've seen the videos of our root cellars and our storage inside our house as well. It's all about realizing how there's going to be significant pressures, both economically and socially, because there potentially will be famines, especially if we get severe weather events that are going to disrupt the relatively fewer number of farmers that are producing these large commodities, these important commodities at this point. So I didn't want to make this video too much longer, but I'll put a link to the All In podcast below, and I'll try to share a link with the video that I did on the Victory Gardens back on March 24th, 2020. If you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up. Feel free to leave comments and suggestions and your ideas, what you're doing with gardening this year. There's never been a better time to start planning for producing your own food. And if you can't do it on your own place, find a place that you can work out a relationship where you can use somebody else's larger yard if you're in an urban setting, or if you're in an urban setting and you know people in the country that you want to volunteer and do the work there, you get a food bonus from it as well. Work in exchange for getting the food. There's ways of dealing with these situations, but it takes planning and setting up relationships, starting the seeds now, those sorts of things. Thanks so much for watching, folks. Stay safe and take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.